Okay, so Mormon Girl Next Door here is going to introduce us again to the subject matter we're talking about, and she's trying to clear up misconceptions as she perceives them with regards to Mormons and polygamy. And we're going to get a little deeper than what's regularly discussed about polygamy and so forth, the mythology that the church puts forth. We're going to talk about the spiritual wife system. So let's let her roll here now for more.
It's still a little bit confusing when they really aren't. So we're anxious to get that word out there, make sure people understand that Mormons don't practice polygamy anymore, but we did in the past. That is part of our history for sure. Before I close, I wanted to also address that I've received a few messages from people with a little bit of hateful terminology, I'll even say, saying that Joseph Smith, who Mormons believe was a prophet, was a sex-crazed scumbag who just wanted to marry a bunch of women in order to have sex with all these women. Now, I looked into this claim, as well as other people, other authors and such, to find out what the truth is, because, let's be honest, none of us, the critics or us Mormons, were alive during the times of Joseph Smith, so we can go back to the records. And the evidence, as I've read and as other people have read, shows quite the opposite. In fact, new evidence has come out recently, and I'll include links in the video description, showing that Joseph Smith was more of a reluctant polygamist. He wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of practicing polygamy, but God made it very clear, a few times actually, before he actually practiced polygamy, that that was what was going to need to happen. And so Joseph Smith agreed to do it because God is all-knowing, and you follow God's advice, right? Or commandments even. But Joseph Smith wasn't only just a reluctant polygamist, he treated his wives very kindly. In fact...
Okay. Well, he treated his wives very kindly. First of all, he only had one wife. The rest were concubines. It's completely illegal to marry other women in the states where he resided. We've gone over that. I'm going to change the photo here and then we'll keep going. Okay, so to cover, recount on just a little bit of that quickly. So far, what we've seen is exactly opposite of what Mormon Girl Next Door is telling us, and we're going to get more into the details. We saw that Joseph Smith sent men on missions and went after their wives. He went after Orson Hyde's wife and got to her. So she was a shared asset, I suppose we can say. Orson Hyde had to share his wife with Joseph Smith. He received Kimball's wife, but settled for their 14-year-old daughter instead. He was an apostle, in case you're not aware of that. He went after Orson Pratt's wife, Sarah Pratt, and she told him to take his blessings of Jacob and hit the road. And we read about her testimony and that, and John C. Bennett, who also witnessed some of that, even though his name has been, as anybody who says anything about Joseph Smith that isn't what the church wants to hear, he was defamed. Now, I'm not saying he was a great guy. He was doing the same thing Joseph Smith was doing. He was a ladies' man too, and he was in the first presidency. He rose quickly to power after joining the church when he helped Joseph Smith out, got the Nauvoo charter, for the Illinois government there with his connections, and he trained the Nauvoo Legion, I believe, and he was very instrumental politically for Joseph Smith. And then he was in the Council of 50 and got involved with a lot of women and wasn't sneaky enough, so they had to excommunicate him. So Joseph Smith also went after Sidney Rigdon's 19-year-old daughter, and we'll probably read about that, her testimony, plus a letter that's actually part of the documents of church history. You won't probably find it on LDS.org, but he wrote her a letter after she rebuffed him and said some things that are pretty appalling. Basically said, you'd be surprised what God's okay with. He wants us to have some pleasures that are normally considered off limits, and you got to go along with it. I'm the man. It's pretty ridiculous. And he went after William Law's wife, and she was also, like Sidney, anyway, William Law was in the first presidency, as was Sidney Rigdon. So he's going after women whose husbands are in high places or fathers. And, of course, supposedly Emma Smith had the hots for William Law, and they, as it's said in some accounts, she kind of wanted to do a little bit of what Joseph was doing, it says. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but Section 132's got some pretty interesting things to say in one of the verses where, if you take a look at that, and you see where the Lord says Emma belongs to Joseph, and she's now commanded not to partake of what the Lord commanded him to offer her. And I'm pretty sure that's what we were talking about, was the William Law deal. So when Hiram went over there, showed him Section 132, and proposed the open marriage deal between the Smiths and the Laws. From some things I've read, the Laws weren't too keen on it. And Joseph Smith had shown up at the Law's door at night when William Law was out of town, going after Jane Law as well. So they weren't okay with it. They were a moral couple. And so, of course, they've become infamously enemies of the church, traitors and tyrants, and now fight him in vain. Everybody who had morals and stood up against the, advances of Joseph Smith in his escapades or sexcapades is labeled, a traitor, apostate, evil, and so, we're trained to instantly disregard what they have to say. But these were people with good reputations, and they were moral, and so William Law wound up, he talked about this, and then Joseph Smith was the one who said, William Law's accused me of adultery. They say I have 7 wives, but I can only find one. So he was denying any activity with other women other than Emma, his entire life, except for with his, inner circle of people that were involved with the spiritual wife system and the Council of 50 and things like that they knew what was going on. And there was just this is much more massive than your 34 women that the church says he was married to or sealed to. Remember, he couldn't marry them. It was completely illegal. It's a euphemism at best. These were concubines. Of course, he says in section 132, he says that the Lord says that concubinage is fine. So, but he denies that he was involved with it. He never submitted section 132. And so he denied what he was doing the entire time. Well, he broke the laws of the land, was dishonest about it, and of course he was breaking the marriage covenant that he had with his wife. You've got to remember, she married him in the terms, of normal marriage, which are cleave unto her and none else, forsaking all other women. Those are the terms of the contract that she would have agreed to marry him. And so we're to believe that God said, go ahead, break your covenant. Remember section 76, it talks about who's going to hell. Liars go to hell, adulterers, and whosoever loves and makes a lie. What's that? Is that, similar to adultery or divorce or something? Well, it's kind of wondered exactly what that meant, but we're talking about breaking most solemn covenants here. And we're to believe that God told him to do that, ridiculous. Of course, section 132 talks about taking virgins. It doesn't talk about taking other guys' wives, and then you had about a dozen of those that we know of. I think the church admits to 11 of them, and then they just try to pretend, well, he wasn't getting intimate with them. Okay, so if you seal to these other guys' wives, then they, of course, don't have an eternal companion. The entire plan of salvation is frustrated for them, so they need to go chase another woman when they've already got a family. Go ahead and wreck their family. It doesn't look like it's a very family-friendly doctrine. The more we look at it, the uglier it gets. So, is it really more logical to believe Joseph Smith with the record that he has for dishonesty than someone like William Law, or who was, or William McClellan, these guys that were not okay with the adultery, and they were not willing to participate in this, and they blew the whistle on him, which was the big problem. So Joseph Smith was mayor, and he had the newspaper destroyed illegally, violation of freedom of press, violation of private property. When the paper printed section 132 and said, yeah, Joseph did have some other women in his life. And I've read it, and I didn't see anything that wasn't true in there that I could tell. So what he did was completely illegal, and that's how he wound up getting in trouble. Of course, he also was, after, I think he got bail or something on that, but then they instantly charged him with treason. Since he'd been crowned, king of the world in the Council of 50, and said he was head of the kingdom of God, and they were going to take over every place. That's one of the reasons Missourians were not happy with them. So let's look at some more of this concubinage stuff now, and go to some documents. I'm just going to continue reading this from Grant Palmer. During the last several decades, much has been published about Joseph Smith's doctrine and practice of polygamy and polyandry. Little, however, has been written on Smith's belief in the practice of concubinage. Smith taught that Abraham received concubines, and they bore him children, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness, etc., etc. Smith said he received an appointment from God to restore all things, which included the practice of having many wives and concubines. We've talked about that. There's nothing in the Bible that said God commanded it. We see instances of where things were practiced, but no commandment. Okay, that God ever commanded any prophet. Okay. However, there is no evidence that God ever commanded any prophet to practice polygamy, polyandry, or concubinage. Smith's idea and practice of concubinage is different from that found in the Old Testament. His practices seem more similar to some guys doing the free love thing there, not too far away from where he was. A lot of things show that Joseph Smith appeared to be copying a lot of things, all sorts of things. Anyway, here's 4 examples of chronological order of Smith's dealings there. So in the last video we talked about the deal, where he went after Lucinda Harris, and where he went after Sister Sarah Pratt, and I think we talked about Melissa Schindel and Sister Warren, whatever. Let me pause it for a sec. Okay, so Sister Pratt said basically that he didn't introduce this whole sealing business until he went after Louisa Beaman in 1841. He said that he just, he gave them the concubinage doctrine where they could be the woman for the night, the wife for the night. And so this is, an apostle's wife saying this, and she put up with her husband being involved with polygamy for a number of years, and then she said, I've had it with this garbage, and him being in bed with these young girls all the time, and she divorced her husband, the Apostle Orson Pratt, in Utah. Alright, this page here. Would you share your spouse with the prophet? Yeah, this is not on LDS.org, but guess what? It references where everything is out of church history and various documents, and actually it's pretty darn accurate, unlike what the church has to say about that. Okay, so here's what failed attempts here on women, married women. John Taylor's wife, Heaver Kimball's wife, but he got his daughter, Orson Pratt's wife, William Law's wife. Okay, so here it says, he came in the middle of the night when William Law was gone, and he later called on his wife to corroborate, and he says, he asked her to be, he said God had revealed that she was to be one of his spiritual wives. And he pulled that on a lot of these women. And it's outlandish. It's horrendous. So, William Law says, my wife's not lying. Joseph is. I mentioned the deal with Sidney Rigdon's daughter. We can read about that. I'm running out of time here. Stealing the Wife of Harry Jacobs is heartbreaking. You should read about that one. It's heartbreaking.